This interview is with Ruby Roseman-Gannon. She's the Australian kind of punchy sprinter type rider. And yeah, she's just an amazing person. We really gelled. Ended up talking a lot about neuroscience towards the end, which was really interesting actually. And yeah, she's a great rider on the road to recovery. So hopefully we get to see her at some of the races during the summer. Hope she gets picked for the Olympics. I honestly feel it could be a style of race and course that suits her. We'll just have to see what happens. But yeah, I look forward to seeing where she shows up and all the results she's inevitably going to get. Hi, thanks for joining me. How are you?
Not too bad. I have been better. I'm not really currently on the bike at the moment, so
Oh
sort
gosh.
of nearly at the point where I'm back training. So yeah, it's always hard, I think, having forced time off. But yeah, I'm on the tail end of that, so it's good.
Yeah, and I know you say it's hard. Like, what makes it hard? I guess you're a bike rider. You just want to ride your bike. You know, it seems quite simple, but yeah, what makes it difficult for you?
Yeah, well, I guess like particularly, well, anytime to be honest, I struggle a bit. Just like it's so much part of your routine, like the exercise, and it's not always like that you're excited to train every single day, but I think every time you come home, you feel so much better at just generally exercising. So I think it's hard. Yeah, I'm a bit addicted to that feeling. But also, I guess this week is probably the biggest week in the cycling world, one of the biggest weeks, with Flanders this weekend, and it's a big goal for me. So yeah, I guess having to like pivot and instead of racing, sort of be back, rehabbing and stuff is not so fun. But yeah, I guess it's just part of the sport.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me actually that you bring up Flanders as one of your goals, just because it's probably my ignorance, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, she's a great sprinter, and kind of that probably is where it starts and ends for me, just because of where I've seen you get great results. How do you see your kind of rider type?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say that I'm a pure sprinter.
Mhm.
I'd say like certainly my power probably isn't that of a pure sprinter. Yeah, I kind of need a harder stage, I think, to sort of have a bit more selection and a little bit more fatigue. I think I'm probably more in the middle of a lot of different things, like
Hmm.
not really incredible at one thing, but yeah.
Yeah, sort of genuine all rounder. I think that actually, to be fair, that does show in like the results I'd seen. Like you're super consistent. Like the the Bakerits. I think Herald Tour as well. You basically as soon as you got one top 10, like all your results were top 10 for the whole race. Likewise, Turning and Tour. Like yeah, how do you find like? Is it easy for you to get consistent, or do you think you are consistent yourself? Like, is this just me misreading?
Yeah, I would say consistency is probably one of my strengths, for sure. Uh, but yeah, I guess like it's also somewhat frustrating because I've been like kind of close quite a lot, but like not really like enough to really like particularly I'd say in European races. Yeah, it's really hard to have that edge to get like the podium or the win. Like it's sort of that next level up. So yeah, this year I think last year I had like some top five sort of results in classics kind of races, in
Mm.
Plouay and in Dwars last year. So this year I was like really hoping to sort of step up again in those one day classics races. So really try and like go for podiums. But yeah, things just happen the way they do. And yeah, like I said, yeah, I guess this week was a big goal, but at the same time, it's nice to have the whole season to sort of reset and work towards.
Yeah, well, given that you've had to kind of realign goals? Like, what are your current goals for the season, coming out of this rehab and get back on the bike?
Well, my biggest goal for this year was to make the Australian team for the Olympics,
Mhm.
which was partly why the classics were kind of important in that. But yeah, it's kind of now a lot of it is out of my control. It's kind of just like I've got some scores on the board, but yeah, at the end of the day, I'd missed sort of the most crucial part of the selection period, which is this period now. So yeah, we'll see. I just have to sort of wait and accept what is a bit with that. And then yeah, I guess one of my other goals was women's tour. And then yeah, I was kind of off and on a bit, and I think I am going to that. So that will be, I think, really cool. And then also Tour de France.
Hmm.
So yeah.
That'll be really interesting. I quite like the Olympics just because it's like such a small team that gets selected for every nation. That to me is like you can't just, you know, I guess like Australia did in the commies, like just stack the team on the front and get just drill it and inhibit every breakaway, which is a fair enough tactic. It gets you, gets results, but you can't really do that in the Olympics with a small team. Um, if you were to race, what would be your kind of tactics or your way about looking at it?
Yeah, well, I guess yeah, it's it's not really that like the Commonwealth Games road race wasn't, I'd say, the most exciting race, probably thanks in most part to us. So yeah, from a spectator's perspective, I completely agree. I guess from like a tactical perspective, you always have to sort of go with your highest chances of winning, and that was kind of the calculation made. And I guess like yeah, like you said, there's a lot more, I guess, randomness in a race where you have small teams. Like if the Dutch had 7 riders, I think yeah, it would be kind of in the Italian world, maybe not in the cycling world, it doesn't really have necessarily every single one of the best riders
Hmm.
because predominantly they're Dutch and Italian. So there's so many riders that miss out that if they were from any other country would be going. And then without the radios, I think we saw last Olympics, it really adds that element of chaos because I think we become complacent with having information in our ears all the time that like there's something just nice about, I don't know, sort of like the natural flow of the race just happens and you have to be attentive. You can't rely on like someone in your ear. Yeah, so I guess, and in terms of my like for me, I guess I'm definitely not, if I was to race, I definitely wouldn't be coming in as a favorite. Like there's some really, really strong teams. So it looks like a really hard course, like a course that probably suits positioning, maybe similar to a Glasgow World situation from last year.
Hmm.
So I think it will just be about like yeah, taking a risk, or but also just like positioning and sort of being on the ball the whole race.
Yeah, in some ways, it's one of those that you kind of have to be ahead of a race to be in it. It
Yeah.
might even suit an early breakaway just being ahead because then you can kind of roll around for a top 10 by the end of it. Although obviously it's the Olympics, everyone wants to win. Um, and yeah, it's nice that it's got that comparison to Glasgow Worlds, which given that Lotte won there, would favour her that as well. But as you said, like anything can happen. It'll be really interesting to watch. That's for sure. Um, and you mentioned the kind of lack of radio. I guess it's evocative of racing as a junior, because you never get such luxuries back then. You just have to kind of race for yourself. Um, and now to use that as a lovely segue, like I want to talk about like how you got into cycling and kind of where the passion for it came, and what's led you on this journey to eventually talking to me, but also being a pro.
Yeah, well, I guess it started with my dad. He wasn't athletic at all in his sort of youth, but before I was born, he sort of got to a phase where he was like a bit overweight. He had a family history of like cardiovascular disease, and he went to the doctor, and I think the doctor said, who's the cook in your house? And he's like, oh, me and my wife and stuff. And they're like, oh, I think they're a pretty good cook. Which I don't know. I think it's probably not the best thing to say as a doctor. I probably wouldn't be saying that, but it actually really motivated my dad into riding, and he became obsessed. He just like he loves racing. Like he's been watching men's and women's racing, like even before women's racing was like that accessible. He'd just find a random link. Like he's kind of like diehard fan. And he also races himself, like loves racing himself, masters level, but not like particularly competitive in terms of like, he just likes, I don't know, training a lot, doing his best, but like he's not like, crazy about it. But he took me down to the junior clinic when I was 5, and it's a velodrome at the end of our streets, the Brunswick Junior Clinic. And yeah, a lot of riders, Australian riders from Melbourne, have gone through that clinic, like Mitch Docker, who rode for EF Cannondale, and then Luke Platt, Sarah Gigante, among others. I think Lizzie Williams, who used to ride for Orica. And it's just like a really grassroots sort of cycling program where they have all the track bikes there. You pay $5 a week per family, and then you just rock up every Sunday. And so I did that for 5 years till I was about 10 or 11, and then I started doing club road races and riding on the indoor track. But I probably just ride/race twice a week. I never really trained much, and I wasn't really that good. So I just I don't know, just attended, and I wasn't till I was a bit older that I guess I got a bit more competitive and started winning like at an under 15 level or under 13 level, when I got really excited and motivated, and that's when I kind of I guess started growing my love for I guess the tactics of the sport, where it's really quite it's a thinking sort of exercise, whilst it's also a physical thing. And I never really training then. It just seemed like it was sort of I just loved racing, and I just didn't have much motivation to train. And then in my adolescence, there was I guess a lot of funding in Australia for the track and not much for the road, so it kind of funneled me into the track side of things. Not necessarily that I preferred it, but financially, my family didn't have a lot of money, and I was at school and couldn't really work, train, study, so it just made sense to go sort of down that route. And then I went to Track Worlds in under 19s, I think. Yeah. And I wasn't probably that motivated to become an elite cyclist, because I guess at the time I didn't really see it as a feasible career, particularly coming from Australia, because the financial burden of moving overseas, I don't know, putting so much time and effort into something that didn't seem sort of financially stable, whilst I was also studying a lot and kind of had uni aspirations, which sort of drew me away, I guess, from really going all in for cycling. And I think if I was going through the junior ranks now with the current situation, I probably would have a very different outlook, just because now is really, it is a career. It is, you can go overseas and you are paid. None of the riders I knew who were going over from juniors were paid or had good insurance or anything really coming over here. So I studied and I did my bachelor's degree, and I kept doing track. I still was I still loved racing, and I loved, I sort of grew my love of training through that. And then, I ended up going into the track program, and I moved to Adelaide for that. But I think I realized I really loved the freedom of the road, and I think I was really motivated to sort of leave the track program and get on a road road team, because then I could sort of get away from the track. Not that I hated track, but it was just like I just craved that sort of more racing, more freedom kind of situation. And I finished my degree and then I got this contract. So kind of all just worked out well.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. What was your degree in, just outside of, well, out of interest rather?
I did a Bachelor of Science, majoring in neuroscience.
Wow. Uh, yeah. That, yeah. Sorry, that's taken me aback actually, because I did not expect that at all. Gosh, that's crazy. And then yeah, so you started with it. Well, according to First Cycling, which is where I tend to go for most sort of stats, you started with, was it the ARA team? Um,
Yeah.
and then you ended up on Jayco. Like, how did you know like Jayco were interested, or like was it someone? Did you have to reach out to them? Like, how did that all go on? I think I said it to actually someone in the dev team yesterday. Like, I find contract admin, as much as I love watching races, like the bits that you don't know a lot about really fascinate me, and contracts kind of do, and how things actually happen in real life.
Yeah, for sure. I think I also similarly was very like perplexed and interested by the whole process when I first sort of went through it, because I'd worked before, sort of done job interviews and sort of more formal interviews for
Hmm.
other like scholarships, or like, I don't know, just, yeah, more of a formal situation where like you make an application, you go through an interview process, and then like you receive like yes or no, and it's kind of like in a time frame, and yeah, you kind of like know when you're going to know. Whereas, yeah, on the road, it's quite strange. Like, I guess I had some, like, I guess I kind of hit this sort of, uh, I don't know exactly what happened in terms of why I suddenly improved, but I finished my exams and I had like one of the hardest years of studies probably I've ever done. And I did actually really, really well that year, because I was kind of gunning to maybe do postgrad med. So I was like really focused on my studies. And then I finished and I was completely exhausted, had like, yeah, mentally just gone, trained really hard. And then I kind of started getting results in the summer of cycling. That was in the summer of 2020. I think I got like a third in the Herald Sun Tour, and yeah, a few other results that sort of suggested that maybe I could be quite good on the road. And went through like some people at AusCycling and like a former coach, and just sort of asked them like, how do I sort of go about this? And that year it looked like potentially quite promising to actually sign a year earlier than I did in 2021.
Hmm.
And I was sort of in discussions and stuff, like no agent or anything. But then there's also one spot still on the track, the Olympics track sort of selection thing. And I was like, I really want to just give that a crack.
Hmm.
And I just felt like I never really like fully committed to track. So I just wanted to give that one last go, and they're like, yeah, we can wait. And then, yeah, in the end, it sort of fell through, because I probably should have just jumped, earlier, and I really regretted that. But I also was super motivated to be like, okay, we go again, and like I'm gonna like come into Summer Cycling flying, because it's really the only opportunity I had to like show what I had. And I didn't really at the time want to go overseas in a situation where like I didn't have money or support. Just personally, like,
Hmm.
that for me is such a stress that it would take away from like my ability to train or my ability to enjoy my life, I think. And then sort of, yeah, I went through sort of discussions, and it was just over a prolonged period, and I was unsure. Like, it was kind of very up in the air. But then all of a sudden they were like, yeah, here's a contract you can sign. And yeah, then I signed, and that was it.
Wow, that's amazing. And obviously, it's still Australian team, although clearly behind you it's not Australia. Um, I'm going to assume Girona because everyone lives there. I swear, like almost every pro seems to be there. Um, and how have you found like moving to Europe and living over here rather than being in Australia?
Um, I guess like it has its yeah, I mean, we don't really have an option. So I guess when you decide you want to become professional, you know that, yeah, you know, you've got to, I guess, move. And then that I think isn't too bad in some ways, because you really, like, I really felt like I went through a process of sacrificing the person I used to be to become the person I am now. Just in terms of like all my friendships and sort of living more of like a balanced or normal life. Like when your friends are normal people, they want to do normal people things, and like I guess it's just sort of can be a bit of a distraction from sort of the life you have to live as an elite athlete, and it can also be incredibly good, I think, for your mental health and like balance. So I mean, we don't have a choice. We move here and we leave that behind. So I think it's an opportunity to really like become more professional. But then I guess like when things are really like when things are good, I think it's really good. And I think when things are hard, like when you have an injury, kind of the situation that I have now, you kind of just want to be like at home, like see your family or your really close friends, because like you can't ride. So yeah, but yeah, otherwise I think yeah, I've moved to Andorra this year, so yeah, it's been good, I think.
Yeah, and I guess Andorra's great for all the mountains nearby. Makes for very easy training, I guess. Like very hard training, I would imagine, though, and completely different. I'd like to actually pick up on something you mentioned earlier about like always getting close and finding that frustrating. And actually talk about the times you didn't get close and you actually won, because you know you've got two. Well, I've spoken to quite a few national champions recently, but never a double national champion, because you've got both crit and road, which is yeah incredible. How does it feel to be firstly a double crit champion because you won it 2 years in a row, I think, um, and then also how does it feel to be the current road champion?
Yeah, I won the crit champs 2 years ago, and my teammate
Oh,
won it last year, Amber. But just no problem. Yeah, I I guess I had big goals for this year. Like kind of like I said, like I had this sort of like
mm,
really want to level up. Um, so I did like put in like a lot of work over the off season. Probably like my coach would say maybe too much for the season ahead. So maybe this forced break is a blessing for the rest of the season, because I don't know how much longer I could have sustained everything. Um, but yeah, I guess nationals is a race that I think it's like, well, the road race, the crit for me this year, like I was not like the protected rider. I didn't feel any pressure, and I kind of just attacked early, and I don't know why anyone didn't chase me. I think a lot of people don't know why. So I mean, that was kind of felt a little bit like a gift, and just an amazing surprise, and I guess a confidence booster in that like I knew I was going well. um but then yeah, the road race, I guess it's the race I felt the most nervous for. Like one year I really struggled to sleep before, like I only got 5 hours sleep. And yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like in the past, I think I've only done it maybe 4 times. But in the past, I kind of would come into the race because I knew it so well, kind of with this sort of very rigid idea of how it would play out, knowing all the riders so well, knowing the course
mhm,
so well. This rider will do this rider will do that, and then my best chance is from this situation. And it was like so rigid that when it changed, like one year in 2021, there was a early break, which I didn't expect to go based off those riders. And then I expected like Sarah Giganti to chase it down. And then I completely misread I had to sort of pivot and be more flexible with it, but I didn't. And I finished that really disappointed. So I knew I had really good legs that year. And then like similarly the following year, like just trying to like control sort of that sort of small group scenario when there's only you and you have like 10 other riders and there's
mhm.
attacks going, and like not overriding it. Like I was overriding it the past like 2 years, really overrode the final. And then this year I guess I just came in and like my goal was to like stay calm and just be really flexible. Like, don't try to not like sort of come up with these ideas of how I could win the race, and just like go with it and trust my intuition. And yeah, I guess I ended up in like 3 breaks during the day. So, and that's not something I would normally think would be a good idea for, I don't know, in the previous years. But yeah, it worked really well, and yeah, I ended up winning. And I was shocked, and I still like, I don't know if it's fully like sunk in that, yeah, I won it, because it was the goal for so long.
Yeah, and obviously it must feel really nice to get to wear the green and gold for quite a lot of your races. Do you feel any extra pressure to kind of represent? Because, you know, on paper you're the best that Australia has now. You are their champion. So is there any extra pressure? Do you race any differently with the green and gold on, or are you still just Ruby essentially?
Yeah, I think I forget a lot of the time, to be honest, until I
Well, you look
like,
down and
because
you're like, oh yeah, that did
yeah, I
happen.
mean, I kind of like blending in a little bit more, to be honest. I'm not someone who, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, of course, I'm proud of the jersey, and it's like incredibly, yeah, it's been a goal for so long, and it's so special. But at the same time, like, the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, what jersey I'm wearing or what I'm doing. I'm just in the race, and the majority of the pressure I feel is pressure I put on myself to, yeah, I guess, do what I can do to the best of my ability. And I think most of the time, if I can do that, I finish really satisfied.
Oh, that's good. And yeah, one question that occurred to me, kind of as a side note, is like, does your degree, like, do you ever apply parts of your degree to your racing almost and to just your general day life? Because yeah, I've done tiny bits about, like, I know about the amygdala response, which is like when you just get super angry and that rush of blood to the head essentially. And it's like, which for me it's great, but equally it's like, yeah, I can describe it. I can't stop it happening, but I can describe it. Do you ever apply parts of your degree to your everyday life, and does it help you as a rider having that degree?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, I guess I would say, like, with my degree, the best thing it gave me was like a framework in which to understand the world, kind of
Mm.
because a lot of the sort of smaller detailed facts that I memorized intensely, I've like forgotten. It's been like so long now. Um, but in terms of like I can read sort of a paper and like understand where that would fit into sort of my framework of understanding, and also I guess my critical thinking about like, well, in a lot of respects, like, so much that I don't know. And I think neuroscience is an area that like pop psychology just loves to, like, even like the Huberman podcast, like, he is a neuroscientist, but I would say like some of the things he says, there would be a lot of, yeah, scientific contention, I guess, about
Mm.
how, valid what he says is, or he might overstate some things. And so I guess like I really like love that sort of, I love like trying to be scientifically accurate, I guess. So in terms of that, and then I feel like there's so much I don't know, to the point where it's like, if I was applying, little bits of knowledge that I understand, like most of what I learned was like relatively basic and not that, specialized, and definitely not on a clinical level where you're like, okay, this person has like, I don't know, an amygdala response, like PTSD in this situation. Therefore, the appropriate, treatment is this. No, it was like, okay, in the amygdala, there's like a circuit with the hippocampus, and then, fear circuits, and then we can look at like the neurotransmitters involved and stuff. So it's not like incredibly applicable on an individual level, but
Mm.
at the same time, like, there are a lot of things. Like, one thing that I think about a lot is pain,
Okay.
because we know that like pain is less to do with the physical stimulus and more to do with our internal, like, basically the brain's perception of the stimulus. So like, for example, like when you're going full gas, and this is something I find a lot, like in an effort by myself, just in training, going full gas, and I get more thoughts around the pain, how hard it is, whether it's feeling harder than normal or whatever. But then when I'm in a race, I don't like, there's times where I'm going full gas and I don't feel anything. Like you're just sort of like floating. You just so in that state of like flow, and you're not thinking, and therefore you're not feeling pain. And I find that really interesting. Like, how could we capitalize on that? Like, how can I capitalize that in my training to get more out of myself, for example? Like that's what I find interesting. But there's often not really necessarily a scientific answer to that.
Yeah, I think I might have had something similar myself actually, like time trial training. I cannot do it on my own. Like, but then, even riding a TT, a solo TT, like you give me a bloke with a clipboard and a stopwatch counting me down from 10, and I've got a number on my back. I can push myself so hard. And if I'm doing that on my own, I
Yeah.
can't. And like, there's nothing
Yeah.
different. Like, it's literally an arbitrary person with a stopwatch.
Yeah, exactly.
And even
Yeah.
then, I'm not even viewing the stopwatch. I don't even know if it's working technically.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
and that's so
Exactly. And
weird.
there's some people who get the opposite. Like in training, they're really, really good and they can get the most out of themselves. But then in
Mm,
racing, they struggle with their mind and they can't get the best out of themselves because, like, due to anxiety or, fear, or just sort of not being able to get into that flow state in that environment. So I think that's really interesting as well. And I feel like there's a lot of things like physiology, nutrition, sleep. We kind of understand that, and we kind of know sort of the limits. And maybe there's more. Maybe there's another 1%. Maybe there's something else
mm.
we can do. But I feel like in terms of the mind and like these sorts of things, I just wonder whether we have like the enough resources in them on an individual level, individualizing this and like really trying to prioritize that. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, certainly is. And like, as you said, like some people racing out of fear, I guess, like depending on context, like I found like I race so much better if like, well, I've not raced at a terrifically high standard. I would never, suggest anything otherwise. But there have been races where a teammate who I know is clearly better than me has been stuck behind, and I've gone, okay, I'm just going to drill it. And again, I can empty the tank a lot easier for them than I could in a sprint for
Mm,
myself. And it's so weird that, yeah, I guess racing for someone else and with a different goal in mind
mm,
and change your physiology. Well, not your physiology, but you know what I mean? Like,
mm.
can change your performance.
Yeah,
Uh,
100%. Yeah. I think on that, because I race a lot at the club level, because I guess in
mm,
Australia that's that, and a lot of the time it's just like graded mixed racing, like with my dad, honestly. And I feel like, other than there's some quite dodgy tactics that I'm just like, why are you on the front bringing back my break every time and then coming last in the sprint? Like that really frustrates me. But other than that, it's exactly the same as like a world tour race, like it's the same feelings, the same. Yeah, I think it's mentally for me, like sometimes I'm really nervous for a club race, but I don't know why. And yeah, but yeah.
I guess just out of interest, how do you perform when it's a kind of like a VO2 test and things like in a lab essentially? Do you find you perform better on the road when there's a finish line to race for versus just performing against a graph and against data almost?
To be honest, this is like one thing that I actually have worked on a lot.
Hmm.
Because I've always been someone who has raced really well and struggled with the mind in training, like just struggled with sort of intrusive thoughts, like just I've never lacked motivation in racing. And in fact, like when I'm in a race, like I'll always go all in kind of thing. Like, and I'm so
Mhm.
like sort of hyper focused in that racing scenario. But then in training, I just struggled to have sort of the focus and struggled with like negative thoughts and sort of like this feeling of like, I guess, extra exertion. And similarly in lab tests. But I would say, yeah, I guess I just really worked on self-talk during efforts, during lab tests, during all these sorts of situations. And I think there's people who talk about like a training and a testing mindset. And a training mindset is I can't actually remember the details, so I'm just going to butcher it if I try and just describe it. But for myself, I would say like there's situations where like the training mindset is just like, you know, today is like there's no pressure on this session. It's just about doing what's asked of you and not trying to sort of like perfect it or go all in, or, you know, because you couldn't do that every single session. But then there's some sessions that you have to treat as if they're a race and put a lot of pressure on yourself. And sometimes like before a test, I guess I've kind of, when you have a lot of data from your own efforts, like sub-max sort of efforts, you kind of get an idea, you can predict what sort of power you would do in a test or what you might be capable, like within a range. And so like the night before, I remember just like visualizing sort of the power numbers that I thought I could do, and then like visualizing how I would deal with like how it would feel, how I'd deal with it, and then in the actual effort, kind of feeling like I'm in that race mindset, like have the pressure on myself, like sort of treat it like a race. And I'd say that's probably how I do a lot of my hard sessions now, and my tests and VO2 sort of sessions. And also I listen to really loud music in my ears, because I feel like when I can't hear myself breathe, it's easier.
Okay, I've got 2 spin-off questions that are coming out, and I don't know which is best to go with first, but I'll go with this one. How do you find turbo training then? Because for me, I'm like, if I'm on a turbo and it's really hurting, I'm like, I can just get off. Like, I can get off and the pain stops, or I don't increase the pain at least. Whereas on the road, you're 10 miles from home. If it's painful, you've still got to get home. You don't get a choice with that training. How do you find if you've ever had to ride on turbo? I guess in some ways, being from Australia, like I don't think you need the turbo so much compared to us in the UK.
Yeah, well, I did go through a very prolonged lockdown period where I was within a 5K radius of my house. So I did do a lot of turbo training, and like I got through it, but I wouldn't say I enjoyed it. And then I think it was like 7 weeks of that, and then I had to do hotel quarantine in Adelaide. So then I spent 2 weeks in a hotel room, and this was like coming into a period where then there was Olympic trials for the track, so I had to be going really well. And I ended up doing two 19-hour turbo like weeks in the hotel quarantine. And I was really, really dreading that hotel quarantine. Like I was really, really anxious, I guess, about being sort of stuck in a room and being able to train and all that. And it ended up being like 2 of my favorite weeks of that year.
No way.
Enough. Like, yeah, I did a lot of work with my psychologist, and I also did a lot of meditation, and it was kind of easy to create a routine where I would like wake up, meditate, have breakfast, do my training, have a lunch, do like core strength, whatever. And then I ended up sort of enjoying it in the end. And then now I would say like I do most of my training on the road, but I'm not against, like, especially for a really high intensity session, I think I like the ergo. And particularly I live in Melbourne, which is actually quite a large city, like I think nearly 6 million, and I live sort of in the center of the city, so it takes me probably 40 minutes to get anywhere where I can actually ride at a decent power, or maybe 20 minutes, I guess, to get to this 3-kilometer stretch of road that I ride up and down. And I've done 5 hours sometimes on this really short stretch of road that there's no traffic lights and not many cars. So I guess like from the perspective of like where I live, I guess like I've had to sort of go in situations that aren't ideal but still sort of get the best out of myself. And I'd say having like a coach that like really is quite supportive and that doing efforts that I really believe in and I enjoy, and then going to places, like I always try and do my efforts at a place, like whether it's on a turbo or in a location, a place that I have good memories of and I've had good sessions. I sort of go to the same place over and over again, and for me that's really effective.
Oh wow, that's really interesting actually. The other question was going to be about what music is it? You said you like loud music, but what have you got? Like, what's on your playlist?
Probably just like dance, techno, house kind of, yeah, remixes, whatever. I get like sick of the same songs over and over again. Like I kind of have a training block and I'll listen to those songs in that training block, and then I finish the training block or I get to a certain point. It's just like naturally I just sort of begin having an aversion towards those songs, and then I just create a new playlist and start again. So it's kind of
Mm.
cool going back through my playlist and being like, oh, this reminds me of like my May training block last year that I had really good, had a really good sensation and came out of it going really well. So yeah.
Yeah, does that ever happen then that you just hear a song that was on a playlist and you're like, oh, that was a bad training block, and you start remembering that? Like, for example, for me, like Party Rock Anthem by LMFAO,
Yeah.
like that used to be the last song I'd listen to before going to work, when I used to work at a train station. And that, like, I had to get up at 3:45 to do that, and like, so I get whiplash hearing that song and like transported back to being like bleary eyed at 4 in the morning. Um, yeah, does that happen to you, or are there any songs that you're trying to actively avoid nowadays?
To be honest, not really. There's not
Okay.
like anything I can think of. And I know you asked the question about like whether neuroscience has like informed, like kind of
Hmm.
informed my life to any in any respect. I remember there's like we have like a positive bias towards um the past. Like
Hmm.
we that's why I find nostalgia, and I think that's why, like, even though I have definitely had hard training blocks and stuff, they're always positive memories. Even though, yeah, I don't know if I listen to music as much when I'm feeling bad as well. So I think it's probably just a mix of all those things.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. And it almost goes into one of my kind of niches of expertise, well, not even expertise, but part of what I did German at uni, but part of it was talking about life writing, so autobiography and how you describe yourself, and what they call filter of memory. So when you like try and think of stuff from your childhood, like everything seems slightly different. Like you're not going to remember a building to be the exact size it is. It's always going to be slightly bigger and slightly
Yeah,
smaller.
yeah.
And kind of for you, like in some ways you filter out the negative thoughts of a hard training session and just take the
Mm,
positive parts of it, and kind of how your memories, yeah, as I said, filtering it out and changing your perception compared to the actual real life perception of the time.
mm.
And that's
Yeah, for
really
sure.
interesting as well.
Yeah, I think, well, the other thing is like you're constantly remodeling your memories of things you've had. So every
Mhm.
time you listen to that song again, you're remodeling your memory of the past. So I think, yeah, over time it kind of just becomes more positive. And I was like, oh, I was really motivated then, and I was like smashing my hits. But like, if I actually, I probably was just very similar to how I am always. Like I kind of sometimes will glorify certain training blocks. So like, I came out of that so good, but at the start of the training block, I was doubting myself, and I was like, oh, I'm not in good form, and all that.
Mm.
So
Oh
yeah.
wow. I guess somehow we've managed to cover 45 minutes already, which is incredible, and I'm very grateful of the time. So I'll try and wrap things up now. How can people keep up with your ongoing, or your goings on, what you're up to essentially on social media, etc.?
I'm not really a big poster most of the time. I post occasionally on Instagram. I probably should post more. Um, but yeah, so probably just Instagram for the occasional post. And I go through phases of posting a bit better, but yeah, recently I have not been posting that much. So
Awesome. Well, just about now, people will be able to see a screenshot of your Instagram. I've got that level of video wizardry at the moment, um, and obviously we'll link to that and the team's sites in the show notes, so that people can have a look at that. Um, and yeah, thank you so much for your time, and yeah, I really hope the rest of the season goes well, that you rehab goes smoothly, and that you're able to, yeah, just get back to it, really.
yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Well, there you go. That was a lovely little chat we had. as I said, she was a really great person. We really vibed, and yeah, just thoroughly enjoyable. Even if the Andorran internet services tried to scupper us, um, yeah, she's a great person. And as I said in the intro, like I look forward to seeing what races she does and the results she gets. Until next time.